Welcome to this recorded webinar. I'm Sabrina Brando from Animal Concepts and delighted to present on caring for and caring about animal care professional perspectives on the human-animal connection, education, and conservation. And of course, in light of celebrating International Zookeeper Day, thank you so much, IZZ, for putting on this fabulous webinar series. I would like to dedicate this webinar to my friend, the late Graham Law, who was an amazing person and an amazing zookeeper and scientist, so many wonderful ideas, a soul force for animals, and delighted to have worked with him. So really inspired. If you haven't come across his work yet, I highly recommend to check it out. He was really a force for animals and for change. So why this presentation? Of course, when we're thinking about, who are we? Who are we? And I really include myself here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. But when we're thinking about why is it important to think about who we are caring about, because that's often why we get into this profession, and what we're caring for and who we are caring for. It is, of course, very important to understand who we are as the people in service of animals, in service of species and the planet. So it's very much about the well-being of the individual people that all are going to make up the organizations that we work in, whether you work in a zoo or an aquarium or a sanctuary, really anywhere where animals are. It is very important for us to understand, what does it mean when we are in these professions, right? Because that also gives insights in, our motivations and our challenges and how we, can support the people that are in these professions. What sort of services do they need? What sorts of processes, procedures need to be in place? What sorts of strategies need to be implemented. So all these aspects are important because they are ultimately fundamental, of course, to our well-being and the well-being of the organization, but to the goals that we are working towards, which is, of course, animal well-being, but also conservation, species, protection of wild places, and of course, our education programs, our research programs, our engagement, entertainment programs, and everything else we do. Because ultimately, it's about not doing any harm, right? Not doing any harm to people and really kind of promoting, like we promote positive well-being of animals and flourishing in animals. We want to do that also for people, and also really thinking about it as a system or an ecosystem of different systems that are working together in a symbiotic manner. And of course, there's various ways of going about that. I'm not going to go into that today exactly, but we could be looking at different dimensions of human well-being, whether they are mental or social, environmental, and then looking at various important questions that we want to ask when it comes to promoting optimal well-being for people and, of course, having healthy, good organizations to work in. And what are then some of the risk assessment and resilience assessments? Because we're going to talk along the spectrum of the things that are really wonderful and the things that can be very challenging or difficult. So a little bit about me, because sometimes people like, why are you talking about zookeepers? Or they don't know that I actually have been a zookeeper for a very long time, for 16 years. And actually already starting a few years before that, volunteering, as many of us do and continue to do. I still volunteer today. But for me, actually, my first job was in 1992, working with harbor porpoises and with rage and sharks and caring for stranded animals, and then working with sea lions and walruses, and then little by little working with all kinds of different animals in different places as I grew, from a junior zookeeper to a senior, and then become a zoological director at some point. And, but always really working close with animals in their care, whether it was training, enrichment, the daily things that we needed to do. So to me, even though today I'm not working directly with animals anymore, it does feel, like I'm still, part of me is still a zookeeper or a caregiver or whatever other word that you identify with. And this was probably one of my last, conferences in Avifauna. The first IZZ conference was one of the last conferences that I attended as a zookeeper, if you like, before starting my company, Animal Concepts, in 2004. So very good memories from that. And yeah, so that is important for me to share. So today I still continue, of course, working with care staff, zookeepers, curators, with all kinds of organizations, still, working on global collaboration for flourishing everywhere. And we are really, with Animal Concepts, focusing on, of course, the animals, but also on the peoples, the greater community of life, and the beautiful planet that we share. So we are really trying to think about well-being for everybody. And the important part of is we all have different expertise and different backgrounds. So, we need us all to work together so that we can make a difference for, whatever it is, why we got into this job, and that is slightly different for different people. So, and of course, I still follow a lot of different groups, and I live vicariously, positively through all the stories. And I, feel the heartache when people share about losing an animal. I still remember those moments as well. And I'm so delighted, and we are, and I keep saying we, even though, I already mentioned I'm not directly working with animals anymore, but we are a really diverse bunch of people, anywhere from, of course, those that really love reading, and the artist ones, and, all kinds of different regions that we are in, some that, focus more on conservation and others more on care, those that go and travel in their holidays. So there's a lot of us out there. So, it is important for us to understand really more at a deeper level also who we are and what we do, because we do a lot of different things. And of course, we care for the animals on a day-to-day basis. But we also, we bowl for rhinos. We set up organizations to help, animals in the wild or other animals in sanctuaries. There's, of course, the Keeper Conservation Committee with grants. And we go out and build bridges for orangutans. There's just so many examples of all the things that we do when we are working for our animals in zoos and aquariums and beyond. And of course, also really the educational, the inspiration that we have when we touch other lives by talking to young people or talking to older people, the children that come to our facilities, or when we go out to facilities. There's just so many different things that are part of our lives. And there's a lot of very good things in, going on for the, even though we have difficulties with and very sad stories around what happens to the planet, to habitats, to animals. And this is why it's relevant when we talk, for example, about ecological grief, hearing those stories, how does that affect us? And also when we hear about healing, and when we hear about protection and about things that we can do to make a difference. And so, for us, it's a very personal journey. But it's important to think about what does that mean for us as individuals and us as a community. And so, I've always been interested in this question about why, especially also because I asked myself that question over the years, why did I get into this profession? And of course, when I started, it was really because I loved animals. I went to all kinds of different zoos and aquariums, and I wanted to be close to them and care for them. And I was interested in species conservation and protection of animals and preserving wild places, and all the things that really drove for me why I wanted to get into this profession. And that is a question that I've kept asking myself throughout, and it's still for me important, all those aspects. And on top of that, I have really expanded in, what does it mean for us to care for an animal? And what does it mean, for us to care about other motivations, and how do they support each other, or how can they sometimes be in conflict with each other when we are caring for an animal, but that animal maybe needs to go somewhere for a breeding program or is going to be released again. So, there can be things that support and things that can be in conflict, and how do we deal with that? And or particularly, how do I deal with that? And of course, planetary well-being. So really looking at well-being as a whole. And the important part is to find out what it is, what your own journey is. Why is it that you do what you do? And in what way do you feel capable and able and motivated, inspired to do that particular job? Because we all have different talents and different interests. And it is important to find out what it is that drives you. Right. So just like it was important for me to say, okay, I can do this, but I know that particular jobs in animal protection or even in anti-poaching or so, I couldn't do that, or some things are just too hard for me to deal with, and I don't want to work on it. It's important people work on it, but it won't be me. So really, having those reflections on when can I do something or when should I not do something, always kind of keeping in mind that do no harm principle, which is really something that is, when you're looking at human well-being, something that like in traumatology or the Green Cross, some of the training that I've done there, that's kind of the principle, right? So having that reflection of why did you choose this profession helps you think about, okay, in what way can I support my own well-being in what it is that I would like to do, and what might harm my well-being when I try to do the things that ultimately are not so good for me. So, and that's a very personal journey, and happy to talk about that some more. But at some point I thought, oh, I'll just do a poll and see, why do people get into this job? Because I was having a really interesting conversation with Dr. Linda Berg, and where we started to talk about caring for and about animals, but we also care about other things. And so I thought, okay, let's just ask people, right? And so we had this one question, and thank you so much for playing along. What do you care for? Who do you care for? And what do you care about? And then people could just take animals, conservation, education, research, or entertainment. And then, we, of course, what did you answer? Of course, we need a lot more in-depth conversation and understanding. It seems kind of a simple question and silly, but to me, it's not. It's kind of a start of a conversation that really in our field needs a lot more attention, because it really drives again to the motivations, right? And the support that you need, or the work that you might want to do. So thanks for the 163 people who played along ticking. Everybody said, we care for animals and care about animals. And then a lot of you said, 83% said, we want to do this because of conservation. So very high motivation to be involved in conservation projects, which is very clear from a lot of the posts. And then we see less people education, less research for various reasons, and entertainment. And entertainment is, of course, kind of a crossover with engagement and education, perhaps. And of course, there's a ton of limitations to asking these kind of simple, stupid questions, perhaps. But, it is a good way to kind of start the conversation, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to kind of progress. So for me, it was important to ask that question and see, okay, so how much are people motivated for a particular topic? And if research is that low, is that because there's not much research going on in those facilities, and so they don't have necessarily the opportunities, or we don't necessarily know? And that's interesting. For example, in the podcast that I do, people that come on, the speakers, they tell about the various ways that they got into animal care or animal welfare. And a lot of times they thought the only way to get in was kind of veterinary care. And they didn't realize all the myriad of jobs that were out there. So perhaps you don't necessarily know what research you could be doing, or maybe you have never done research. So, there could be various reasons, of course, why those percentages are low, and they could very well be higher. Or perhaps I have sometimes had bad experiences with researchers, and luckily not that many. but sometimes it's put you off on a certain topic. But then if, things are better organized, and then there could be a kickoff meeting for research and everything else, then suddenly things can be a lot more fun, right? So, but it's interesting just to ask that question. And of course, there's so many different kind of motivations, it seems, but when we look at what do we actually know about, zookeepers, who are we, who are you, and what matters, or how do you see your job? There's actually really few information out there, few papers out there. One of them is already, almost 20 years old. And you can also see, not 20 years old, what am I saying? 12 years old. But, you can see that when you're looking at those titles, that a lot of it is also about, how hard this job can be. And that's important, right? So we often say it's a passion or it's a calling, and then there's also difficulties about it. And what is interesting, of course, is that we see similar overlaps with other animal care professions, like laboratory workers or people working in animal shelters. But it's a lot also about challenges. So it's interesting for us to really look at the breadth and continue the conversation to really look at, so what are the joys and the sorrows, what are the positive things and the negative things, or the harder things that we encounter in our jobs? And in what ways do we as individuals have to show up? And in what ways do organizations in which we work have to show up? So that we, like I mentioned in one of my earlier slides, can be in this symbiotic relationship, if you like, where we are, where it's kind of based on care and respect. So so this presentation is a mix of different aspects, and this is a paper that, together with Professor Lynette Hart and Dr. Patricia Resina Lopez, we are just writing this up. But we were asking this question, how are you understanding sorrows and joys of caring for animals in zoos? And I thought to share here a little bit on our findings as well, so it gives you a little bit more insights in people in this profession that we're thinking about taking care of animals. And most of the people who answered were animal care professionals in zoos and aquariums. And then we had some junior and senior care staff and curators, and we separated the survey off in a way that veterinarians who have different job descriptions together, as well as educators, some specifics. We felt they really need very more specific surveys. So that is also what it has been conducted already for veterinarians, but also for educators. We are collaborating with educators to give us more insights in what would be some of the questions. So there again, thank you for filling out this quite extensive survey for those of you who did. And again, it's important for us, this is really a pilot study. It's share, conversation starter, and it's based on conversations with friends and colleagues and my own experiences. So I've used my own experience of working as a keeper, working as a zoological director, thinking about how did I experience the job and how did my colleagues and my friends experience the job? What are the things that I liked about it? What were the things that were really hard, or things that almost caused me to burn out or shift, find another job, or all the things, what was the joy and what were the sorrows? So we focused on job satisfaction and the joys of the job. That is really important to me, is to really, look at the breadth, because we can, of course, focus on how burned out we can be, or overwhelmed or overworked. Compassion fatigue, of course, is a very, important topic today, empathic strain. But we also have to go to the other side, right? Just like when we look at animal well-being, we really want to talk about the positives and the negatives, or the neutrals, and how that differs for each of us, because it is ultimately an individual journey. We had organizational and animal related questions. Of course, we had some questions that focused or revolved around burnout and negative stress, carer fatigue, empathic strain, and then compassion fatigue, of course. And for that, we use the definition by Figley on secondary trauma and burnout. And then also what we wanted to do is look at in which ways are people exposed to animal suffering or trauma or distress directly or indirectly through stories that you hear or that you read or that you receive from your colleagues. So the types and the extent to that, and in what ways are we doing animal welfare assessments? So kind of teasing apart, you can imagine if, say, I'm feeling burned out or I'm compassion fatigued, I have a different lens. I'm wearing different glasses through which I see the world, through which I see people, and through which I also see the animals I care for. So understanding, and we tend to want to always do more for the animals because we love them. We want to do the best we can. And so, but my glasses, the way that I feel or that I perceive the world because of this, my own psychological state that I'm in, can very well affect how I interpret the well-being of the animals. So it was important for us to kind of tease apart and see in what ways can we look at that to get a better understanding and a deeper understanding. So questions in the survey were about age and, you know, the position that people had, how long they had been in the job, the title, and the country. And people can just, they could just tick all that apply or just use a scale from never to always. And we also left text boxes, so you could write whatever you wanted in there. And some filled in the question, both from the department and others also from a management perspective. And so we had, as I mentioned, organization and animal related questions, anything from working conditions, communication, the challenges, perceptions at work or after work, because we know that, you know, our work tends to kind of flow, we take it home or to a certain extent, or it's more about life work integration than a balance. Possible improvements, of course, job satisfaction and employee celebration. And then for animals, we talked around planning, budget, animal celebrations. And with celebrations, we really mean like, what are we doing to support people or animals? What do we do to, you know, put them in the spotlight to really, you know, celebrate them as the individuals that they are? Communication, again, challenges, welfare conditions that people were perceiving and how they were assessing the well-being of animals and possible improvements. And this, you know, we're just going to give you a few sections of what we found. And this is a paper that's hopefully going to be published in the next few months. So we are in the process of stats analysis and writing it up. So if you're interested, just follow us and for updates. But what did we find when it came to sorrows or difficult things? Poor communication, little attention to animal welfare, poor interdepartmental collaboration, that it was understaffed or low salaries, long hours and feeling overworked, people that were thinking of quitting, struggling with self-care options at work, and finding it hard to set boundaries at work, including, you know, being able to say no when you can't work that day or can't work longer. And of course, taking work home, not just physical, but also psychologically thinking about the animals when you're home. And of course, a lot of people mentioned also that very few zoos, and we're saying zoos here, but with meaning zoos and aquariums, have healthcare professionals on staff that can help you with, for example, a self-care routine or dealing with the loss of an animal or anything else that you may need. And then a particular section that was also important with regards to animals, of course, and sorrows, if you like, the negative aspects perceived, that there was no or low budget for care, enrichment, or refurbishment. People perceived poor animal welfare, inadequate record keeping. So it was kind of hard, like formal or regular animal welfare assessments were not really done, or lack of actual animal welfare data to actually base decisions on. People mentioned poor and substandard housing, lack of appropriate social groups, so also animals single housed or, you know, not appropriate social groups, frequent stereotypic behavior, seeing animals who would be better off euthanized, and animals who spend a lot of time locked away in small areas or being on a rotation schedule. And then we asked people specifically about animals and euthanasia, and of course euthanasia was given as one of the things that's very difficult for people, including for surplus animals, but also of course when it came to the quality of life, including aging animals, because of course quality of life is about your whole life, when you're little, just born till when you are very old. So quality of life in general, or quality of life when it came to aging animals, or euthanasia, for example, lack of space for other reasons. And what is important to note is that when we ask questions about the various aspects related to euthanasia, that none of the people who answered these questions are currently satisfied with the process. So whether it is opportunities to say goodbye or talk about the animals, or practice remembrance for the animals, or knowing that the animal may end up in a bin rather than perhaps being buried or some other ritual. And, that people just in general felt there was too little attention to this final stage of an animal's lives. And of course, we also want to look at the joys. We want to look at what are we doing well when we're saying we care, the organizational care and self-care, the individual care, or the perceptions. And of course, what, organizations are doing well. People reported that there are many learning opportunities, both on a personal level and some of it motivated by the organization. People said, management is committed to animal welfare. We have a budget. We have, opportunities to make meaningful changes for animals. And our opportunity to connect with others who care for animals was very, very important. And also feeling to be contributing to greater causes or other causes such as research, conservation, and education missions. So here you can see how that relates to that one poll question that I put out a while ago. And then other joys, of course, is time with the visitors and the animals together, whether it was ambassador programs or shows, presentations, or keeper talks, good animal welfare, and a good time of having with your animal directly, whether you were playing, spending time training, enrichment, but having a good time and a good relationship with the animals. And of course, learning new skills while caring. That was one of the things that people also noted. And educational options. So how they felt celebrated by their employees through praise and acknowledgement, paid internships, paid conferences, and paid continued education or personal development. So lots of different opportunities there also to celebrate. And then in the text boxes, there were some really important things written. I feel obligated but scared to voice my concerns. So when we're thinking about how do organizations show up for the people that care for the animals, we can talk about, is there a safe and brave communication opportunity? Can you feel safe to voice whatever it is, and will it be taken seriously? I have no one to talk to and I feel overwhelmed and guilty. The animals are more important, and I think these we'll just let them sit there for what they are and what they meant to people. But they're really, really important for us to sit with ourselves and think about and see, okay, because of course animals are important, but you or I am as important. And how do you make sure the saying, put on your own life, your mask on first before you help others. You have to take care to give care. But how do we move from a space of feeling that we are less important to feeling I am also important, and self-care is not selfish? And those are really important things. We can't breeze over these. All of these are very important. I don't know what to prioritize, my career or my health. And what if I leave this job and I can never get back in? And some of these I have certainly felt myself, like being afraid to give up my job and not knowing if I'll get another of these, because it's a highly competitive work field that we are in. And so I'm really grateful for everybody who shared their personal thoughts and feelings with us. I need to stay in this job. Finding a job with animals is so difficult, but then I don't want to stay. Caring for animals is my calling. Animals help visitors connect to the natural world. We owe them a good life. And animals give me joy and I trust them. Thank you, everybody, for sharing these with us. So as I was looking at, the stories that I read through all the Facebook groups and thinking about my own experiences working with animals and for animals, caring about them and about other goals, and thinking about, of course, the research and the poll and everything kind of together, I started to play around with, so there are these positive things in our work, and then there's the negative things in our work, some of which are like sorrows or distressors. And some of them are kind of eustress, it's positive, but it gives us a bit of like stress because, and that could be for various reasons. And also, I mentioned how animal welfare and conservation or education goals can, overlap. They can support and really help each other, but they can also bite each other or be in conflict with each other in that sense. So in what ways do we kind of look at this? And so this is not a dynamic diagram, but as I was making it, I was kind of moving these circles out and in and over each other. And I think, at least for me, it was helpful doing that to kind of see, so how much of the positives and maybe the eustressors overlap or not. And also, if I'm having a good day, like I work in a great team at work, I have good self-care, good boundaries, I feel well, how those circles overlap and how I feel about certain things. One thing is having your why, your purpose, why you're doing this. But you cannot, disentangle that from how that is going to also be affected by the way that you feel or the way that you show up day after day in the work that you're doing. So if you feel inspired, try. So I was kind of putting, the sorrows, and I was thinking about, okay, a decline of a species. I'm sad about that. I'm distressed about it too. So it's kind of falling, in that area, in the overlap. And then, providing enrichment for animals is great, and it's mainly a joy, but it can be a little bit stressful if you think you have ticked all your safety boxes, but you're still a little bit like, ooh, this is going to be a little bit different. How is that going to turn out? So it was interesting to see what happens if I move all of them apart, and if I, bring them closer, and in what ways do they interact with each other, and in what ways do they reflect how I feel, so because it is highly personal, even though we might have very similar purpose, similar why of why we're in this job, it's still very personal. And of course, dynamic, depending on how you feel, where you work. A lot of it could be you're actually enjoying feeding the animals, doing enrichment and so on, but it feels very, stressful because you're working in a small team. So, and these are the dynamics that we, of course, also interact with when we're thinking about animal well-being, right? And we are another animal. But when we're thinking about our well-being, in what ways can we really think about and organize this? And how does that change, right? So I'm still playing around with this, and it might look different again, but I'm looking at in what ways can I visualize or represent what our work is about, or what my work is about. So as a former zookeeper, and it doesn't have to be a zookeeper, as a person right now who always wants to do a lot of different things for a lot of different animals and people and places, one thing that I have to learn, had to learn and have to keep practicing on a daily basis is that I cannot do everything. I cannot help everyone. I cannot help every animal. I have to have very clear boundaries, and I have to bring, I get to bring. So that's another thing that I learned from one of my mentors. So if there's one thing also really important, is to always have mentors. And one of my mentors mentioned is like, try and frame it in I get to do this instead of I have to do this. So I would like to do a lot of things, but and I get to do some of them, but unfortunately I cannot do everything. But one of the things that has helped me tremendously in the last years is gratitude practicing. And I've done lots of different gratitude practices. And at some point, I designed this one and I wanted to share it with you, and perhaps you find it useful. I have shared it with a few others who care for animals, and they have used it and they found it useful and joyful. And so I thought I'd share it with you, and I hope that it's useful to you, that you enjoy it. So gratitude, this is a very short exercise. It's about awareness, about celebrating, and about tracing. So gratitude is, research and practice say that gratitude can change, really your brain. People are 25% happier if they keep a gratitude journal. They sleep half an hour more per evening and exercise 30% more each week. Well, there's all kinds of different numbers around this. But in general, the different gratitude practices really show that it's beneficial to your well-being. A number of evidence-based strategies, including self-guided journaling. So there might be, you just write, or you have reflective thinking like prompts that you gratitude journal on, or you write a gratitude letter to somebody. And there's research that shows that when you then take the letter personally and read it out, and you could read out a letter of gratitude to a colleague, but also to an animal that you care for. You can do a gratitude visit, have all shown to be effective in creating sustainable gratefulness. And there are hundreds of different happiness strategies, and gratitude is just one of those, right? So, I'm just showing you today the one on gratitude. So the important part here is that when you're doing gratitude journaling, writing, I had a jar for a long time. Every day I would write a few things that I was grateful for and would put it in a jar. And then when the jar would be full, I would, read them again. But the important part is when you write and when you journal, especially if you do like 3 things that you're grateful for, is that you focus on the detail. So, like slightly different things every day or every time that you write them, so that you that it's not adapting, hedonic adaptation. So, every time you say something slightly different, that keeps this gratitude practice fresh, if you like. Gratitude is virtue and requires effort and mental discipline. So think of it as cultivating gratitude, just like resilience is a muscle that you can practice, that you can grow. The same is for gratitude, in the sense that you can cultivate and you can grow it by practicing it. Now, awareness is a very well-known word, also in animal care and welfare, and in conservation and in education, like raising awareness for an endangered species or caring for an animal. We raise awareness of subtle differences in the behavior or emotional expression, which makes us think about, oh, the animal's doing really well, or the relaxed, or the animal may be not so well. And awareness is something big and small in the at the same time, right? When you think about all the things that you can hold in awareness. And John Kabat-Zinn, a very, very kind, wonderful, famous mindfulness teacher, he shared that insight with me, which I thought was really amazing. We can hold all those things in awareness, right? But you can also focus your attention on this one little thing to kind of savor it, to really feel it, or to really pay attention to it. So throughout the day, there are many moments that you can commemorate. You can connect with an animal or with a team member or with a visitor, or of course, importantly, also with yourself, so that you become aware of how wondrous, intense, peaceful, still, special, comfortable that particular moment is that you are aware of and that you bring awareness to. So you're really, you've heard about mindfulness, being in the moment. And this is what we are talking about, the quality or state of being aware, knowledge and understanding that something is happening or exists. And then celebrate. Celebrations, we know them from so many occasions: birthdays, anniversaries, throw a party, hold a special event, or shining a spotlight on someone or something special. We celebrate that to honor, especially by ceremonies or mark or hold up. And that, of course, ceremonies can be rituals, can be all kinds of things. So we celebrate achievements, small steps every day, perhaps even the same step. Ticking a major desire of your bucket list. We celebrate things that went well, and we give thanks for negative things that passed us by. Celebrations can be expressed through rituals, declarations, momentarily stopping all other activities, like, for example, commemorating people who gave their life. We wait a minute, we pay tribute, we are silent. We could be singing out loud, we plan a yearly date in our calendar, we are silent, we get together with like-minded people. Really, any way that you want to express yourself can fall under celebrations. And then tracing. So when we think about tracing, it becomes apparent that this wondrous word can mean the path or trail that we leave behind or backtrack, that we find traces of evidence that Charlie the pangolin has used the new nesting materials, for example, that you can trace and follow with your finger across the bark where the tiger has grabbed the tree, and that you can trace that spot in your body where you felt the giggles and the warm feeling when you saw Fiona the hippo race and jump around the pool. I don't know about you, but I love that video. So a trace is a mark, a sign, or evidence of something past thing or a moment or path. And traces of love can be found in the work you do with animals, with people, how you show up every day, all the amazing things that you are already doing moment to moment. And how you choose your purpose over pleasure. A lot of us, do a lot of things that are not necessarily in a job description, but we do it. And we do what is right over what is regulated. And traces of care, of course, we can find everywhere, in everything that you do in the service of animals, of peoples, and the greater community of life. So we have awareness, and we have celebrations, and we have trace. And it stands also for act, which is something that is very important to me, because we are actors, we are activists, we are busy, we want to make changes for animals and others. And so this is an exercise or a gratitude exercise that you could try. So pick a moment or think back at something that, happened, that just came to mind, and bring your awareness to that moment of what, that was, and note it. For example, it could be the role that you had in that moment, perhaps guiding a visitor to a particular animal that you wanted to talk about, or an action that you were performing in that moment for an animal. You were maybe, creating a nice enrichment activity, or a moment of connection with an animal or a person as you were going about your education program. So bring awareness to a very specific, detailed aspect, and celebrate it. So give it words, or acknowledge the way you feel, write it out, sing it out, whatever works for you, and note what you have done and also how you felt, and then trace it. So where did you feel that feeling, or where did you have that thought? And you're like, where do I have my thought? My thoughts are in my head. But when we pay attention to where our feelings are and our thoughts are, we sometimes actually feel them in very many different places in our body. So, what did you feel and how will you remember this moment? So leave a trace in your body and your mind. So file it away in a digital album or in a journal, or maybe you have a pocket journal. Whatever works for you. So, for example, I'm Sabrina and I take care of Charlie every day, and that is an awareness that I bring to, I take care of Charlie every day. And so that is a particular awareness that I bring. And Charlie, of course, the other awareness that I bring is when he saw me, he ran over to see me. And, as I am caring for him, he runs over, he came to see me. And I celebrate because what I did, I brought new nesting materials. And some people, when I explained this in another workshop, they're kind of giggling and I'm like, well, I do that every day. And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes the things that seem so like common to us, so simple, is actually amazing, right? That we do this every day. We bring new nesting material, and Charlie is all happy about seeing you and seeing perhaps his new nesting material, who knows? And I celebrate that. And I bring gratitude, I bring awareness, and I bring, celebration to what I do every day. And where did I feel it? I felt it in my face. I feel my cheeks are smiling, just thinking about, Charlie makes me laugh. And how will I trace this? I actually found a really nice little icon on my phone, and run, Charlie, run. So you can put a date there, and you really kind of you really put yourself in touch with what is or was that felt experience. What did that feel like, right? And how can you anchor it, so that you can always go back to it? And it might be touching your cheeks or whatever else would work for you. And how can you then file it? Maybe you have. And so it is important to remember that our brain, and it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, we pay a lot more attention to the things that are dangerous to us, or that scare us, or that are bad for us, than the things that are good for us, right? So it's much easier to remember the bad comment that somebody said, somebody did something that wasn't so great, then actually, the compliments, or that Charlie ran and came and see you. So it is important to, perhaps on your phone, have a little album or something with lots of photos, or if somebody gives you a compliment, write it in there. And especially, on the days that things are not going so great or things are really hard, it is really good to go back. Like, that's what I do when I have a, day. I go back to, a card that, somebody sent me thanking me for my awesomeness, or I go back to, run, Charlie, run, and laughing again, like I do now when I think about that. So if you feel inspired, try, just send me a message if you like. I can send you this exercise, and try it out. Bring awareness, something very specific, celebrate it, and then find a way to trace it and file it away, so that over time you have a whole bunch of them together. And it's incredible to look through. I have many years now of journals, and it's just wonderful to go back to how I was feeling, what I was thinking, and seeing all these moments, difficult moments, but also seeing lots of amazing moments. And, there's lots of them, of course, to think about, whether it's you working directly with your animals, education programs, conservation programs. You can do this, of course, for any topic. Some people are like, oh, I don't know. I keep thinking the same things. And I'm sure, you know, when you practice it and do this, you become, you know, like anything else, we become better as we practice things. And you'll come up with lots of little details because you're practicing your mind and your heart to pay attention a lot more and bring that gratitude and feel it for everything that you are already doing, and knowing that you're doing the best that you can, and that is going to be enough, and that is enough, because we can only do the best, and that is enough. And so to celebrate what we do with whatever, you know, animals or environment that we are working in. So of course, there's a lot of other things, you know, to talk about, and that is really important together to continue this interest, this research, this dialogue on anything from job satisfaction to compassion fatigue. You know, how does that differ in different places where there is a lot of, you know, influx of illegal wildlife trade and you know, pets and confiscations and, you know, all kinds of different joys, but also all kinds of different sorrows that we might be exposed to. And, you know, how do we look at that also from an animal welfare perspective and human well-being perspective, all these different individual experiences, you know, why do people leave? And really importantly, you know, what is it that we as individuals need to do to be well? And how do organizations have to show up for people to be well? So the self-care and the we care, and really, you know, having that in a symbiotic relationship, if we want to talk in the biology language. And of course, for us to really look at other, you know, fields such as lab animals, shelter animals, but also nurses and doctors and police and all kinds of other professions that are all working in service of others, to look at what existing materials and tools and resources are already out there that we could potentially be using that are relevant for our community in zoos and aquariums, in sanctuaries and wildlife centers, for, you know, of course, continuing to care for animals, but also very much about caring for the individuals that care and work in the service of animals and this beautiful planet. If you're doing research in this field, we have a special issue, Occupational Stress and Joy of Animal Care Professionals in Zoos, Sanctuaries, Shelters, and Laboratory Animal Facilities. And you're welcome to send your paper in if you would like to publish there. So you are welcome to find that special issue with Frontiers if you're interested in that and working in this field. And also, if you want to have more information on human well-being, both from an individual and organizational approach, feel welcome in a safe and brave, and it's a monitored Facebook group. It's called One Care. And of course, I always say you have to take care to give care. So I have to take care to give care. You know, you have to do that. We all have to do that. Organizations need to take care to give care. And so like that, we have to come to One Care, caring for everyone. If you want to have more information or join, you know, our platform, which is also all about human well-being, then you're welcome to find out more information on our website. And of course, you know, I couldn't do this without, of course, all of you that answered the poll, that answered the survey, that continue conversations and share all kinds of stories with me. Please keep doing that. I'm really grateful for that. And of course, my co-authors and collaborators, Professor Lynette Hart and Dr. Patricia Racines Lopez, and of course, Dr. Sarah Chapman and Dr. Steve Unwin, with whom both the veterinarians I'm also working. And with that, thank you very much. I have very fond memories of Temaiken, and I very much look forward, and I hope this is going to happen in person, to see some or all of you in Barcelona in 2022. Thank you very much, and I hope everything is inspirational to you, or some of it is inspirational to you. Feel free to reach out, find us on social media. If you have any questions, any concerns, just contact us or contact me. And yeah, take care to give care.